Chad, tough decisions have to be made whenever you hire a all-time great or a fan favorite or an alum of your university to coach your primetime sports, right? Michigan's done just that, firing Juwan Howard after that they went, just 9 wins this season, 8 wins, excuse me,
8-24, yeah.
8-24 season, one of the worst seasons in Michigan basketball history in the last, 60 years. And this is after we saw a lot of positives with the Wolverines basketball program. Taking over for Bayline, and then you have Howard do some nice things, and then some weird things behind the scenes take place. And then losing happens. And then this happens. You're out the door. This is the right call by Ward Manuel. And now they end up in a off-season, an early 2024, where they're replacing Jim Harbaugh with someone already on their staff. And now they're replacing Juwan Howard, one of the all-time greats, the Fab Five. And you have a situation where you've got the conference expanding. You're at the top of the league in terms of football. And you were in hoops. And that's saying something in that conference. Now they're looking forward to something else. And normally they go with the Michigan man, right? I'm intrigued by this next hire. And I'm intrigued about the future of schools going with one of their own in this. When I say one of their own, not just the Michigan man, quote unquote. I'm saying the all-time great faces, numbers, names of your program and how that impacts what you end up having to do. I think of Scott Frost, for instance. Success should have happened there. Juwan Howard was set up, and we saw great success early on, and you thought, man, this is going to be a hell of a run. It wasn't. And we even saw it yesterday with Jerry Stackhouse. Not an all-time great at Vandy, but one of those names where you've got the former player coaching, super intense, right, on the court. And as a coach, the results were not there. I wonder if the trend now goes the opposite direction, because we've seen a lot of this.
Yeah.
We're seeing like the NFL trend, young coaches from the McVay-Shanahan system. Until that fails, they're going to continue with that. But we've seen a lot of fails with these hires recently. Some work, but the majority don't. And you end up in a really tough spot where Ward Manuel's having to release a statement. Juwan is among the greatest Wolverines to ever be associated with their basketball program. And they're paying him, I think the buyout's like $3 million to get out because of 8 wins and 24 losses.
Whenever you start the press release, if you're the AD, and this AD Ward Manuel, who we're talking about, with after a comprehensive review of the program, I have decided that Juwan will not return. That tells me it's not just wins and losses. That factors into it. And with Juwan Howard, it's not just wins and losses. But
if they were winning, there wouldn't be a comprehensive review.
No, but I will say this about Juwan Howard. I believe the other stuff has led to the losing also.
Yeah, that's fair.
And look at his trajectory. They had his first year out of the gates. They were good. They would have been in the NCAA tournament, but that was the COVID year where the tournament was canceled. Year 2 got even better, got Michigan a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, made it to the Elite 8 before losing to UCLA. The following year was sort of signs that things could be going south. Very talented team that finished 19-15, but snuck into the NCAA tournament and upset Tennessee and Rick Barnes in round 2 as an 11 seed that year, but got to a Sweet 16 because of those upsets. But overall, disappointing season at 19-15 with that talent.
And that was the year that he was suspended before that Wisconsin coach incident?
That was the next year. So that was his 3rd year. Year 4 is where it started to go south.
Okay.
That's where he punched Joe Krabenhoft, the assistant coach for Wisconsin, after he and Greg Gard got into it in the handshake line. That's where that started. And then, of course, these last 2 years, he had Hunter Dickinson last year, and they didn't do anything. Weren't even an NCAA tournament team. And then this year, the wheels really came off for Juwan Howard. I don't know what this says about former great players coaching at a school, or if there's going to be a stoppage of that trend that we've seen in recent years because of some of the results that we've seen. I just know that Juwan Howard, if he wants to continue coaching, I think he'll have that opportunity at some point. He's going to have to prove that he can keep his temper intact. There's too many issues going on with that. There was also the report where he was, suspended or something happened with the athletic trainer on his staff. So there are some big-time issues there with Juwan Howard. I think he's got to get under wraps before he gets a job again or even thinks about coaching in college basketball.
Yeah, and you've got the former recruit of the Fab Five, and just it's a weird. I don't think it stops the ADs from and the universities making this. It's an easy no-brainer hire, right? Especially there where you're looking for the Michigan man.
Yep.
Does this change their trajectory of type of coach they're looking for? I doubt it. But, I mean, it's not like they're going to go out and find Chris Webber.
No. Yeah. What's Jimmy King doing?
Right. So it's not going to be
Ray Jackson still around? I don't. Yeah. Who's the next Fab Five guy to go get? Jalen Rose is going to coach.
He's available, isn't he?
He's available. He is available if they want to bring him back to coach. I don't think that's going to be the case. I wonder if those guys turn their back now on Michigan because of this, or if they understand that it had to be done with Juwan Howard.
I think they know the guy, right? They okay. They're saying what you're pointing out.
Yeah, this could have been a problem, and it became a problem.
Maybe the comprehensive review included, hey, what's this?
Talking to Jalen Rose.
Well, does this make sense? Does this kind of go in line or in sync with what you seem to?
I just see after a comprehensive review, and I'm thinking you interviewed a lot of people, including the dude on staff that he attacked allegedly, and probably others within the program. And there are enough people saying, yeah, this guy he goes nuts at times, and it's a problem. And if you hear that enough times to pair with an 8-24 record this year, then it makes the decision pretty easy.
Easy decision for the ACC and the Big 12 to just go along with the revenue distribution that is finalized for the college football playoff expansion. That is through the SEC and the Big 10, who, even though you have the ACC and the Big 12, who, Chad, they were not particularly happy with not getting just an even split among the four conferences. They did it anyway. And for what we know through, we've got Trey Wallace at Outkick with the story. ESPN, they will have a network paying over $7 billion in a 6-year contract. The SEC and the Big 10, their earnings will come out to about $760 million compared to the ACC and the Big 12 receiving around $440 million. So it's 58% roughly of the total revenue that the playoffs bring in on an annual basis are now going to the SEC and the Big 10. But this is survival mode. This is more or less a parachute. And this is Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti on virtual meetings. They met in Dallas. They met in Indianapolis. More or less in all these meetings saying, well, if you guys don't want to do this, we will split off and do our own thing. And, Chad, we've been saying for a while, we will then hand select who we want from your conference to join us in our own invitational tournament is what it's going to turn into. And ACC and Big 12 said, we would like the invitation. We will accept this, Rose. And we won't be happy with it, but it's all we have, because if we don't do it, we're among the rest who would love to be in the same position they're in.
Sort of the old treat those as you were treated type thing. This is also ESPN, owners of the college football playoff, treating the Big Ten and the SEC like royalty and not particularly caring about the other ones. That leads to this. From this perspective, the SEC is a total partner with Disney ABC. Everything runs on ABC, one of the ESPN's SEC network, for the SEC. So they're a partner through and through. But Michigan's going to get the same amount of buyout for the college football playoff as the SEC, the partner of the network that will carry the college football playoff. Why? Because ESPN values the Big Ten even though they don't have them, and they know this is their way to get the 2 or 3 best Big Ten teams at the end of the year when everyone's watching also. They understand the value of that Big Ten brand, and that's why everyone's going to get the same amount with the SEC and the Big Ten, and then everyone else sort of has to fight over scraps. I know this is out of necessity. I know the ACC and Big 12 and everyone else, this is all they could do to survive. They had to get money, and some money is better than no money. But by signing into this, they have tipped over the first domino in what is going to lead to a complete split from the SEC and Big Ten and them taking whoever they want. Because this is a written admission that they are less than those two conferences. And this may be the first time we've actually seen it to this level, where they're not even the same league anymore. There is no Power 5. There's no Power 4. There's a Power 2 that's left, and this is them admitting that.
This is also
and they had to do it. I know they had to do it.
Yeah, and at some level of if you're just trying to find the staircase of who's making the call, right? Why it's beneficial for each side. There's a side that is the network, and ESPN. They can now have other bids come in for certain playoff games, and they can sell those off. They can lease that game to a streaming service or another network to carry the college football playoff matchup. Well, any school in from the SEC or the Big Ten will receive around $20 million per program for making the playoff. Meanwhile, ACC and Big 12 get $12 to $13 million. I'm saying that because if you have Michigan, Ohio State, Tennessee, Bama, name the school from the top of the cream of the crop, Georgia, ESPN is going to put those games on their network. But you also, whenever you're out, you're able to sell off a game. If you have the ACC or the Big 12 and that's the matchup, Chad, they have to pay those schools less, and then they can reap more of the reward of selling that game. And I think that's also part of this.
I also think that when ESPN gets, we expect, they're going to be the long-term partner here. And if they go with that model where they can sell off other games, I think they'll hold on to the Big Ten games because this is their avenue to have the Big Ten when it matters most.
Yes, the games that matter most.
They have it nowhere else. But, you're right. I think they'll redistribute the ACC versus American Athletic Conference matchup or whatever it is. And then they're going to try to keep the Big Ten. They may even sell off an SEC game. Someone like a Fox who doesn't normally have the SEC, and they say, we want Georgia, we want Alabama, we want Tennessee, or whoever's in that game, because otherwise we're not going to have one of those games all season. Yeah,
or Peacock or one of the streaming outlets, right?
Oh, Peacock. Cannot wait for another big game to be on Peacock.
Yeah. They'll pay another, $125 million they paid the NFL for their matchup, but they did give them Taylor Swift.
The biggest disaster, though, still to this day for streaming in the last couple of years was Paramount Plus for the Super Bowl. That had all sorts of issues. When people tried to stream on Paramount Plus, that's the one, and that's the moment where it can't happen.
Well,
like whatever you do, don't screw up the Super Bowl, and they screwed up the Super Bowl.
I think the big one, and I've been pushing this idea, is Netflix, because they're doing the fight with Tyson, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to have a ton of buys there, eyeballs on that. They've got
WWE Monday Night Raw coming.
Paying $5 billion for that.
2025 it starts.
Yeah. I mean, if that all is successful and they don't have the issues that you just mentioned, they're in this mix for big money.
I listened to a podcast interview with Ted Sarandos of Netflix recently, and he mentioned sports twice as the only truly valuable live product right now. And they're continuing to explore live events.
Not just sports, but football.
Live product.
Football.
Yeah, and they started with Chris Rock speaking for the first time since he got slapped by Will Smith in a comedy event, which is more up their alley. But now if they're going to start more live sports,
it's live sports.
That's not something they've ever done.
It's live sports because they can then monetize it more, not just through subscriptions, but you'll still sit through a commercial break. They can then sell ads on their streaming platform, and you'll watch the matchup because of the impact of not just the game, the casual fan, but also the rabid fan bases. You'll buy into it and sit through. You're paying for the service, but also watching ads that are paying the service. So they double dip, and they don't normally get to do that.
Yeah. I also read something where Sarandos was talking about the possibility of NFL on Netflix, and he said, that they've got their contract signed right now, but made the illusion of a lot of these networks or streamers, they're okay overpaying for the NFL as a loss leader. They don't make the money back. He said, we're still very committed to turning a big profit. I took that as we're not ready to do that yet, and that's not really our business model. We are trying to be global and turn a profit. We're not in the business of we're going to overspend and lose money on something because of the credibility it gets, because we already have so much credibility.
But if they had the NFL, they could put the other streamers out because that's the credibility they're looking for, right? So you could overspend, take a loss, but actually win because you're going to be the place to go.
Yeah, but if I'm Sarandos, I'm saying we're already winning the streaming battle without the NFL.
Right.
So why overspend? We just continue to turn a profit all over the world and let them overspend on that because it's not really helping Paramount Plus. It's not really helping Peacock as much as it is us because we're beating those companies. I can see it both ways with that.
They did
on
have
Netflix.
25 million watching, though, and how many retained their service? We don't know that.
Yeah.
But they did have more eyeballs on one specific, product that they own for that day. And you get the Black Friday game, other things too. Could you take them out and make even more on the long run? They are doing it with Raw. That's a lot, dude. $5 billion for that.
It's a ton.
Chad, Nick Saban, the de facto commissioner of college football, if he so chooses. I asked this question whenever he was announced as one of the next hosts for College Game Day. He's been on Capitol Hill and continues to speak on NIL and continues to be exactly what I hoped he would be, just speaking his mind and telling it like it is.
Instead of having a collective-driven name, image, and likeness, I thought a revenue sharing with name, image, and likeness would be a lot better system that would be able to continue. We would be able to continue to support athletes and athletics in all sports. Football and basketball are going to be fine because they're revenue producing, but all the non-revenue sports have always been funded by the revenue sports, and we want to continue to be able to do that. But, really, you go to college to create value for your future, and I want the quality of life for student athletes to be the best it can be, and I think they should have a seat at the table, and I think they should share in some of the revenue, but I think it needs to be equal across the board. I think what Congress needs to do is we need some national legislation, because now we just have, state legislation, and every state is different, that would protect the NCAA from litigation once we, establish guidelines for the future of college athletics.
There is Nick Saban on Fox and Friends, and Chad, he is not just the commissioner, he's the face of this movement to get something done on Capitol Hill. He's making the media rounds. This is what they need to happen if you have Saban on your side, and he's willing to do it. I commend him for it because no one else is willing to step forward and say anything much. Coach K's talking about taking a deep breath. Saban knows that's not possible. You can't just hit the pause button. And he's trying to be finally more outspoken, even if you don't agree with every single thing he's saying. At least someone is saying something more than, hey, can we not collaborate? We're not going to collaborate if you're not willing to, have us at the first hearing instead of the 11th hearing since 2020.
Yeah, it's interesting because Nick Saban, and he can't help it, but he's always going to see things through the lens of a coach.
Yep.
And I think what he's saying he believes is always what's best for the sport, but it's what's best for the sport through the eyes of the greatest coach in the history of the sport. Mm-hmm. And there's no player representation. There's no, school representation on that. But that's what Nick Saban has said, too. He says, I'm not the one to figure this out. It's probably more of a Greg Sankey or someone with a legal background, but I'm here to offer my perspective and help in any way I can. So Nick Saban doesn't want that commissioner role. What he wants is a collaboration.
But he's the de facto guy.
He wants everyone getting involved and figuring it out.
He's the de facto commissioner, though, is what I mean. Because he's going to be on TV. He's going to be on the most popular pregame show for college football, right? Weekly.
He is the de facto commissioner, but he can't snap his fingers and make something happen is the problem.
Well, because
he's here on Fox News begging for Congress to do something, too.
Well, yeah, because that's all they can do right now.
I know. So everyone's in a tough spot.
Yeah, and what they better on that end, they better hope they have a commissioner, quote unquote, in place before we have the Players Association in place.
Yeah,
imagine that craziness, trying to figure that out with how unorganized everything is now.
It's unless someone can actually, and this is not what I've not seen any of this really, like an actual solution for. Here's what NIL salary cap would look like. Here's how the revenue would be distributed to players. Here's the percentage. Here's what the top level will play at in terms of making it fair with what people can make on a roster. We haven't seen any of that.
We won't until there's a collective bargaining agreement proposed that both sides sign off on. And then you don't have that would give you the exemption, quote unquote, because you have both sides agreeing to that structure. And you don't have to go outside the parameters of it because the players would also be agreeing to it. But there's no proposal because there's no leadership. The leader of Texags is Billy Lucci.
He could figure this thing out.
He absolutely could.
I bet he knows some congressmen.
Let's just make
too.
him the de facto commissioner.
He needs to get with Congress. Billy's the only guy who has not appeared before Congress at this point. I think of everyone
Mr.
involved
Lucci
in
goes to
college,
Washington.
in college football. He's not been questioned yet.